Well, welcome to the Ocean Studio and a continuation of the Yahowah blog. We just had a mighty yawn, or that might have been a roar from the Wookiee. Wookiee wants you to know that our last program was so good that it was pinned to the top of both X and Facebook, and that Wookiee is a little bit miffed with himself for not being part of it. So he wanted to join in on this show. We'll see how long the Wookiee lasts. But it was really a joy. I think the combination of the text that we were reviewing, the message that God was conveying, the tenor of the voice rising to the occasion, if you will, on the voice of the voice, as well as the cinema photography that was produced by Rich as the master of the cables. I think showing more interest in the visual content behind the content, so that you have a better idea of where we are perched here on this balcony. I'm about 20 to 25 feet up in the air above the ground immediately below me, which is why we're up here in the crown of a palm tree. And the ocean, you can see, is all around us. And so it really is a beautiful scene, and we're delighted to be able to bring this program to you from our ocean studio here in the midst of the U.S. Virgin Islands. And to speak on behalf of Yahowah, the great prophet Yahshua began what is probably his most famous chapter, that being the 53rd chapter of Yahshua, which presents the realization that the guilt of all of us was placed upon the Passover lamb. And that is a prophecy regarding what occurred during Matzah, when Dowd, after he had fulfilled, the Passover sacrifice as the Zarowa, as the sacrificial lamb, and then took our guilt into Sheol on his soul, depositing it there, became the perfect example of a great Zarowa. But that whole process of the lamb serving to fulfill Passover and then taking our guilt with his soul into Sheol to deposit it there is precisely what Yahshua was discussing in the 53rd chapter, although until I was able to discern that and point it out to you, no one knew it. And so it's interesting that Yahshua would introduce that prophecy in 53:1 by asking this question: who has come to establish, to verify, and to prove the point of our message, doing so from far away? In other words, the whole point of Yahshua 53 has been now established, verified, and proven by a messenger from far away, a non-Israelite. And he is the one to whom has the Zarowa, whether it's the strong ram, or strong arm, the protective ram, or the sacrificial lamb, even the one who is conducting the harvest of Yahowah, been revealed and made known. And the fact is that in our collaboration together, the first time that Zarowa was perceived as a title as it's used here, and ascribed to the three men to whom it applies, and correctly portrayed as either a strong arm, which is how Yahowah used Moshe, who was the first of the three Zarowa, as both the protective ram and the sacrificial lamb, which is how Yahowah used Dowd as the mightiest and the second of the three Zarowa, and as the one cultivating the seeds for the harvest, which is the root meaning of Zarowa, as Yada, all serving Yahowah. These three men have made this known, have embodied what Zarowa represents, and they have been revealed and made known here for the first time. And it is only that individual, according to this introduction to the prophecy, that's in a position to explain what follows. which is precisely what we achieved. Now, at the point that I read this, and Asher, please. Asher is leaning up against the camera tripod that holds our teleprompter, and when she does that, I'm probably looks like I'm jumping up and down, so that's why I had to encourage her to pick a different place to wag her tail. So at the point of reading this and sharing it with you, I began to feel like, well, I was living within the prophecy, doing so in real time. And there have now been 4 or 5 occasions like this where God has spoken of the role that I'm playing interwoven into the story, sometimes 3,000 plus years ago, in and out of this story as God reveals it. And that might seem complicated or difficult for many to understand because our perspective on time is so linear, and our focus on a person being their body is so extreme, as opposed to how God looks at us, which is he sees our nephesh souls, and our souls can maneuver in time when accompanied by or aided by Yahowah. Prophets go forward in time, they go back in time. Those who witness on behalf of Yahowah, his Zarowa, can go back in time, they can go forward in time. That's the whole concept of being enriched and empowered and enveloped in God's spiritual and light energy. When our souls are carried in this manner, we're able to do these very things. And God's able to bring those he wants to work with into his story at any point in time. Time is simply a dimension. Just as I can move my hand to the right and my left hand to the left, time is a dimension in which God knows how to maneuver and can maneuver us. So anyway, it does feel like, you're living out a prophecy, and you're expanding your understanding exponentially, while we appreciate the role that we would play in announcing the very fundamental nature of Yahweh's fulfillment of the Moed Mikre, which is an exceedingly important part of this story. So in search of answers regarding the Zarowa, because this was such a profound and pivotal moment, seeing the introduction here to the Zarowa and Yahshua, introducing the 53rd chapter. And we're going to find it again in the 63rd, where the great prophet, seeing the man from Edom jump into the wine vat with him and be dressed in red and having him save many. The great prophet Isaiah just leaps at the opportunity, says, that's my Zarowa, that one right there, the man from Edom. And so it was quite an adventure years ago when I first came upon this and began to share it. And one of the things that I did, and I do this quite routinely, just like I shared with you, I looked up every word that was translated humble, meek, modest, that sort of thing, to dispel a myth. And I will pursue things of this nature just to figure them out. One time I spent 2 full weeks looking at every word in the Hebrew lexicon that had a yo, a he, and a wa. And not only make certain that I was pronouncing Yahweh's name correctly, but that I could prove it. So I will do this thing from time to time. And Zarowa was one of those searches. I spent at least a week, maybe 2 weeks, looking at every use of the word throughout the Torah and prophets to make certain that we had it right. And in that search and trying to determine and understand how Yahowah had used Zarowa on previous occasions and in subsequent narratives, we not only discovered an intriguing possibility, but we also found ourselves among the Israelites on Moriah, listening to King Solomon's speech, because this is the moment the concept was presented as this is representative of one of 3 individuals, all 3 individuals really, and what they would achieve when working with Yahowah. And every nuance of the word came alive in that presentation. So whether you want to think that the Nakri, the observant foreigner of whom Solomon spoke, wrote these words, or believe that he is speaking to you now, well, that is your option. But the fact remains that Solomon, Dowd's son, revealed something which should be reverberating around the world, something which should be considered by Jew and Gentile alike. God promised to provide a witness who would show the way to receive the benefits of the relationship, who as a messenger would provide answers regarding Yahweh's Shem, his name, all while serving as a herald to announce the Yad, the hand of God, his Shezak, his impassioned leader, and most importantly, God's Zarowa, the protective shepherd, the sacrificial lamb, the one who sows the seeds for the harvest. Using his Nakri, the prophecy foretells that God would help interested parties reconcile their relationship through evidence and reason, so that they could become part of his Bereth family. Our Heavenly Father expressly, Kara, invited us to read what this Lama'an, this witness, this lone Nakri, observant foreigner, would come to Yada to know and understand by translating and contemplating his testimony. We were encouraged to act upon this individual's conclusions, which means that he will be right about God, correctly presenting what Yahweh is offering and expects in return. In a world of believers, those who have gone astray, Yahweh is offering an opportunity to Yada to know him. In that these revelations are extraordinary, let's take a moment to consider where and why Solomon referred to Yahweh's expanded explanation of the Shabbat in association with the Exodus, while introducing his Nakri, observant foreigner, because I think it speaks of a second Exodus for God's people. Upon the completion and the commemoration of Yahweh's Bereth, family home, which was the seminal moment really in the life of united Israel, standing atop Mount Moriah with the recently completed temple as the backdrop. The man noted for his wisdom spoke to all of us. He began by addressing the promises Yahweh had made to his father, Dowd, while desirous of guiding his people's footsteps. The process Solomon, or in this process, I should say, Solomon selected the word Nakri. He used it to depict a discerning foreigner from a distant place and time, speaking a different language, who, as a result of being observant, would come to understand, to tell the children of Israel and others how they should respond to the words this individual would write and speak on their behalf. It begins, therefore, it follows, Wagam. Someone else, an observant and discerning foreigner from a different ethnicity and geographic location, will come to understand Nakri, the Nakri, the way to the benefits of the relationship. But he is not of your people, this Yisrael. God wants Israel to know. He wants Yehudim to know that in the end, the voice that he has chosen to use to speak to you will be an observant foreigner. He is absolutely not of your people. He is not a Israelite. He is a goy. God wants you to know that. This is profound all by itself. It's one of the reasons the rabbis don't like speaking of the Nakri, then written as Nakar, same word, throughout Yeshaya. And the reason they don't like it is because rather than they, who are never mentioned in the Torah or prophets, being responsible for teaching Yisrael what God's people need to know to return home and to return to Yahowah, it is an observant foreigner. That pierces their very ideology. But who are you going to trust? Yahowah, who inspired these words? Or your rabbis who corrupted them? So therefore, someone else, an observant foreigner from a different ethnicity and geographic location, Nakri, the Nakar, will come to understand the way to the benefits of the relationship. But he is not of your people, this Yisrael. He will come, he will arrive from a distant country in a distant time for the express purpose of being a witness and providing answers regarding your surprisingly important, empowering, and distinguished name. Gadol Shem. The influence of your Yad hand, along with this Shezak, the powerful, prepared, and passionate person who is prepared to lead. And this Zarowa, protective ram, sacrificial lamb, and the one sowing the seeds for a productive harvest, whom you have extended. When he arrives on the scene and chooses to pursue this, then he will help interested parties reconcile their relationship by providing those who exercise good judgment with the information and justification needed to make a correct and reasoned decision regarding this familial relationship. Dabarim ha-yomim. Words of the days. 2 Chronicles 6:32. Pretty straightforward, isn't it? And there's no wiggle room here at all, nothing left to be interpreted. God is saying that there is going to be a Nakri, and that the Nakri is a discerning and observant foreigner. And he is going to show the way to the benefits of the relationship, even though he is not of your people, this Yisrael. And he's going to come from a different country and a different time. His express intent, his purpose, is to be a witness, providing answers regarding something that Israel has forgotten. Yahweh's important, empowering, and distinguished Shem name. It's one of the first things I did, is introduced Yahweh's name back to Yisrael. The influence of his hand, Yahowah has chosen Dowd to be his right hand, and Dowd has chosen his herald to be his right hand. Along with the Shezak, we spoke of the Shezak in our last program. This is a powerful, a prepared, a passionate, a very strong, resolute person who is prepared to lead. This speaks, of course, of Dowd, but it also addresses Dowd's herald, who is nearly as prepared, passionate, and resolved as was the king. And both are Zarowa. So this Zarowa can apply to Dowd as the sacrificial lamb and the protective ram, or to his herald, the one sowing the seeds which lead to a productive harvest, because it is the final Zarowa who is responsible for the harvest of Shabbat and Teruah, so that Dowd can return as the protective ram on Yom Kippurim. And it is God himself who has extended this individual. You don't like the plan? Take it up with him. When he arrives, which he will and has, and comes on the scene, and he chooses to pursue this, it was open to free will. He said yes, but Yahweh knew that 3,000 years ago, didn't he? Then he will help interested parties reconcile their relationship, because God and his people have been estranged for all these many years. And he will do so by providing those who exercise good judgment with the information needed to make a reasoned decision about the bereth, the familial covenant relationship. Therefore, in what is really the Sermon on the Mount, right before the family home of Yahweh's name, on Teruah, Solomon continued, when you hear this come out of the heavens, coming from the atmosphere, say out of a cloud, within the location where you live, then engage and act accordingly, doing everything. Kol, all means all, that's all means, which to show the way. The Nakri, the observant foreigner from another ethnicity and culture speaking a different language who understands, has invited you to read for the express purpose of being a witness who provides answers such that every person on earth will have a genuine opportunity to become familiar with, to yada, to know and acknowledge and accept, understand your name, coming to respect and revere you simultaneously, along with your people, Israel, individuals who engage and endure with God. You know, this is as powerful, as clear, as direct, as important as any prophecy ever presented. And I would dare say that prior to you hearing it on these programs or reading it in the Yahowah series of books, that you had never heard it presented before, because quite frankly, the religious don't know what to do with it. But it's profoundly important. When God inspired Solomon at the single most important moment of Yisrael's life up to that point, at the dedication ceremony on Mount Moriah for the bereth, the house and home for Yahweh's name. And he says, when you hear this come out of the heavens, coming from the atmosphere, as I'm live streaming to you now, some 12 different sites are receiving this live stream at the very moment we're speaking it. So it's sent to you via the internet and satellites, no matter where you live. This is the first moment that has even been possible. And so God says, now that all of this is possible and you're listening to this voice, engage, act, doing everything, which to show the way to the benefits of this relationship. Nakri, a title. This observant foreigner has invited you to read 25,000 pages of translations and analysis. And of all books, a series of 35 books entitled Yada, to know Yahowah. All free at yadayah.com, has invited you to read for the express purpose of being a witness who provides answers such that every person on earth will have a genuine opportunity to become familiar with Yada, to know, acknowledge, accept, and understand your name, coming to respect and revere you, simultaneously with your people, Israel, the individuals who engage and endure with God. This is a collective effort. It can't come from the rabbis because they're reintroducing, this person is reintroducing Yahweh's name. It can't be a Jew because he's an observant foreigner. Can't be a Christian because he's not speaking about Jebus. He's speaking about Dowd, about the Zarowa, about Yahowah, about the Bereth covenant. Can't be at any time other than now, because this is the first time that anyone has been able to do this, to have your voice heard coming out of the sky through satellites, wherever you may live. The first person ever to listen to God and learn from him over the course of 24 years and then speak to you in this way. He was the first in 2,500 years to reintroduce the proper pronunciation of Yahweh's name. And oh, by the way, for the first decade that he collaborated with Yahweh, he did so anonymously under the name Yada. I don't think it's possible for God to be any more explicit. And of course, he began speaking to Goyim. And then simultaneously, he began to focus also on Yisrael. I am the first and only person in human history to meet these criterion. You can choose to do that with that whatever you want, but it's true and it's irrefutable. And God made certain it was that way. His prophets are never wrong. Solomon was a prophet. And also, so that they might know and acknowledge, accept and understand, becoming familiar with Yada, so that truthfully, your family and this home, which to reveal the correct path to give life meaning, that I have built for the family, who are Kara, who are called out, welcomed, greeted, and invited by your name. Dabarim ha-yomim, words of the day, 2 Chronicles 6:33. If probability is your thing, as it has always been mine, and you like evidence and reason, if you were to run the numbers on this and the statements that have been made in this prophecy, and you searched the literature of the world for the past 2,500 years, you would find only one person in all of that time that meets these criteria, and he meets all of them. You may want to listen. You may want to act. It's God's instruction. And I'm not asking you to do anything that benefits me. I don't accept donations. I don't seek followers. I don't have an organization. Strictly for you. God didn't deploy me for me. He deployed me for you. The Nakri is a gift from God to all humankind. You can benefit. You can ignore him. You can even reject him and renounce him. They all come with a consequence. Acting upon what he says will lead you to an eternity in Shamayim. Ignoring him will likely, depending on what else you do in your life, lead to the elimination of your soul at the end of your mortal life. No reward, no penalty. Denouncing him, speaking against him, repudiating him is an express ticket to Sheol. Make a wise choice. Well, Solomon's exhortation drew inspiration from Moshe's presentation of the Shabbat of the Yatzah, Exodus. And so clearly he had referenced the Torah's presentation for a reason. These 4 words appear, one after another, in both statements: Shezak, Yad, Zarowa, and Natah. It's never a coincidence with God. Here is what Moshe revealed in Dabarim 5. So, you should remember and be cognizant of the most memorable of men, Zakar. That indeed you were controlled as slaves in the land of the crucibles of religious and political oppression, Mitzrayim. And Yahowah, not Jesus, not Hashem, not G-D, not Adonai, sure as hell not Allah. And Yahowah, your God, brought you out from there with a Shezak, a firm, powerful, protective, influential, extraordinarily capable, prepared, and resolute hand. With a strong arm, a protective shepherd, and with the benefit of a sacrificial lamb, Zarowa. The resolve and overall ability of this remarkably important and impactful individual who is fruitful in his ways, accomplishing the mission when sowing the seeds of truth, leading to a harvest, denoting and advancing the purpose of the very arm of God, of his shepherd, of his sacrificial lamb, and of the one cultivating the final harvest. Extended Natah reached out to you. For this reason, Yahowah, your God, instructed you, directed you to approach by observing that which is associated with the time of Shabbat, such that it is set apart and special. Kodesh. Dabarim words should never have been called Deuteronomy 5:15. As we consider both speeches, we are reminded that the ultimate celebration of Shabbat commences on Sukkah, shelters, in the Yobel year of the Lamb of God in 6,000 Yah, beginning at sunset on October 2nd, 2033, to the celestial fireworks of a full lunar eclipse. Sukkah's Shabbat will then last 1,000 years. Therefore, for Yahowah to fulfill his promise to reconcile his relationship with his people, there must be another Exodus. This one away from the crucibles of political, religious, and geographic Babylon. That would be the United States of America, the Roman Catholic Church, and the lands now infected by Islam. There's precious little time left. We're only a matter of months from entering the time of Jacob's troubles. And therefore we need to get God's people to listen, Israel, Yehudah, and come back home to the promised land. Sadly, there wasn't a single willing Yehud through whom Yahweh could convey this message. We're told that explicitly by Yahweh through Yahshua. He looked and found none over the centuries. And that means that there would be no prophet nor shepherd for his people at this time, as there had been with Moshe and Dowd, with Yahshua. But there would nevertheless be a witness, a Nakri, who would write what those seeking to be with Yahweh would need to kara, to read, and to yada, know. He would translate Yahweh's testimony and that of Moshe and Dowd, the words of the Hebrew prophets and shepherds, into English, the language spoken by more people today, including Jews, than any other. Time is growing short for another observant foreigner to emerge and compile the requisite translations and insights. In fact, let's just call a spade a spade. There is no time left. I've been at this for 24 years, and it's taken every moment of that time. 10, 12, 14 hours a day, 6, 7 days a week, over 100,000 hours over these 24 years with no other job but this one. And that's how much time it took, and I'm not a slow study, to write these 35 books, to introduce Yahweh to you. But that's not enough time. Not in a matter of, 7 months? And you expect that someone else, another observant foreigner, another Zarowa, another Bashar Herald, another Cole Voice, named Yada, is going to burst on the scenes with a similar number of books, 25,000 pages of translations, and thousands upon thousands of profound and previously unheralded insights. And after writing all of that and offering it all to you free, go visit yadayah.com, that then he's going to invest $100,000 in studio equipment and begin to convey this to you via the Yahowah blog? I wouldn't hold your breath. So you ought to consider every possibility and then welcome him. At the very same time, you should ponder why Yahweh made this prophetic announcement regarding the Nakri, and then consider why Solomon included part of the Dabarim presentation on the Shabbat and Exodus in his prophetic declaration. If they are addressing the same time and these translations, then they are fulfilling his promise, because the Nakri is calling God's people and also Goyim to Yahweh on Teruah, the day of the herald, as he is sacrificed as the Adam of Parah, so that they're prepared to witness Yahweh and Dowd's return on Kippurim and enter the final Shabbat celebration of Sukkah on the Shabbat of October 7th, 2033. That's what this is all about, isn't it? Listen and act. Nothing is lost and everything is gained. Consider what Yahweh had to say so that you can respond appropriately. Even if you don't think that God chose this man through whom to speak, benefit from what he has learned and shared. But this you should be very careful about. Yahweh is committed not to speak directly to his people again. He will not return to them until they return to him. There isn't a single Yehud, not a single Jew, not a single Israeli, who knows Yahweh and who was prepared to convey this message. God is going to do as he has promised he would do. He's going to pick individuals throughout time to speak through. And then he's going to equip them, educate them, prepare them, and enable them to deliver his message. What you do with it is up to you. He never leaves any doubt about whom he has chosen. Now, there is a seldom considered prophecy revealed by Moshe and chronicled in the Torah regarding the Bereth covenant and Yisrael to engage and endure with God, which uses the pretext of being led out of Mitzrayim, the crucibles of religious and political oppression, to predict a second exodus for those who wish to participate in the covenant. Embedded within the prophecy is another reference to the Nakri, observant foreigner. With the past painting the future, this revelation plays out over the span of 3,500 years, culminating with Yahweh's return with his beloved son Dowd, in advance of our return to the garden during the Shabbat celebration of Sukkah. It begins. These are the words of the covenant, which lead to the benefit of the relationship that Yahweh instructed for Moshe to cut and establish with the children of Israel in the land of Moab, along with and as part of the covenant that he cut in association with them in Choreb. Dabarim, words, never should have been called Deuteronomy 29:1. The Torah, which was revealed through Moshe on Mount Choreb, exists to present the covenant. Bereshith, after it presents creation and then the amazing machinations that occur through that narrative of Edom and the garden, such a riveting story that is really very seldom considered and understood. Followed by the flood and the God's dismay with Babel, this intermixing of truth and lies that became religion and politics, leading to his meeting with Abraham and Sarah after they had left Babylon. And as God guided them to the promised land and described the conditions and the benefits of the covenant, as well as his descendants, as he would bear a child named Laughter, and he would then have two children, Esau and Jacob, who will finally be reunited in the end, and that Jacob would have 12 sons and they became Yisrael. That, my friends, is the story of Bereshith. There is no truer or more relevant statement than this. The covenant is the sole reason the universe was created and life was conceived. Without the covenant, there would have been no reason for Adam and Chawa to exist, no reason for the Garden of Eden, no distinction for Noah and the ark, no value to the relationship established with Abraham and Sarah, no Yishak, nor Jacob, no Leah or Yehudah, no Rachel, no Israel, no Moshe, no Torah, no Exodus. Without the Berith covenant, there would be nothing but a lonely God. There would be no Mikre, there'd be no Moriah, no Sion, no Shamuel, no Dowd, and no prophets. Every word God spoke, from let there be light to come out of her, my people, exists because Yahweh wants to be part of a family, a father with sons and daughters. The Israelites were gathered around Moshe expressly because Yahweh made a promise to Abraham. He was not only fulfilling it, he was affirming it. And he would do so again, as the children of Israel had been freed from the crucibles of religious and political oppression within the geography of Egypt. In another day, our day, they would be called out of religious, political, and geographic oppression in Babylon, the place where truth and lies are commingled. The universe and life within it were conceived with words, as was the covenant for which we were made. And this covenant was karat, it was cut, and thus established by way of separation, of setting one group apart from another. By being karat, it is an agreement with stipulations, responsibilities, and benefits, which have become known to us as the 5 conditions and 5 benefits of the covenant. 5 fingers on one hand, 5 on the other. Make no mistake, this wasn't a new covenant. It was indeed men labad, part of the original one, that Yahweh established with his people on Choreb, which was predicated upon the one he made with Abraham. One came men out of and from the other. It, of course, is telling that Moshe, the one who draws out, spoke these words to Yisrael while still in Moab, which means, who is your father? Who's your daddy? These Israelites were not yet home. They were as they are today in Moab, surrounded by incestuous milieu of social, secularist, humanist, and Pauline Christians, all with questionable allegiances. We came to appreciate this prophetic distinction by devoting, I should say, our attention to the conception of Moab in Sodom, which is where it began, then tracing its thoughts through the hideous demise and later chapters of the books in the Observation series. Yes, Moab was born in Sodom because it's the children that were the result of Lot's incestuous relationship in a drunken stupor with his daughters. Who's your daddy? It is from the modern manifestation of Moab that Yahweh is calling his people out today. We have come to know by studying Yashayah 15 and 16 that Moab represents the multicultural blending of sectarian and secular notions, which has become so prevalent in the West. Just as Yahweh was guiding his people out of Moab and into the promised land with who's your father to I'm your father on this day, while preparing them to live in it with him, today he is doing the same thing, calling Yehudim, Jews, out of the places infected with Christian, multicultural, Marxist views into Israel so that he can protect them. Now, one last thought before we press on. Yahweh, the most creative and influential being in the universe, the most brilliant and effective communicator we will ever know, not only worked with and through a man to convey these words, he chose one who was 100 years old, a mumbler and a murderer, albeit with just cause, who had been part of the problem before he became a part of the solution. In his next statement, Moshe makes a connection far too many have missed. Yahowah Ashah. Yahowah acted upon and engaged in the Mikre, thereby Kara, inviting us to meet with him, summoning us to be called out of this world so that we could be welcomed into his, doing so by reading and reciting his invitation to meet. The text reads, and Moshe, the one who draws out, summoned, calling out to all of Yisrael, individuals who engage and endure with God, saying to them, you yourselves have witnessed everything that Yahowah acted upon and engaged in before your eyes in the realm of the crucibles of oppression, before Pharaoh, before all of his servants, and throughout his land. Devarim 29:2. Moshe was addressing those who had been slaves in Egypt and who were finally free. And yet, based upon all that Yahowah had shared, we actually, see these events as clearly today, likely more so than these eyewitnesses. They were not very perceptive. They were embittered. They were cantankerous. Our perspective is therefore superior, as our language skills have advanced as well. And since Moshe's audience already knew all of this for having lived through it, the only reason for recording what we have just heard is so that we could consider everything Yahowah has done and how it is relevant in our lives, particularly in the modern incarnation of Moab. But it is but a wisp of sand before the mount. So please note the Egyptian title, Pharaoh, was accurately transliterated using the Hebrew alphabet 3,000 years before the Rosetta Stone provided scholars with the linguistic clues needed to decipher the hieroglyphics. So why do you suppose these scholars claim that they cannot use the same letters replete with 17 consonants and 5 vowels to pronounce Yahowah? This is a stunning indictment of academia and theology. God transliterated the title of the Egyptian monarch as Pharaoh. And yet you don't think he could convey the proper pronunciation of his own name, particularly when all 4 letters are vowels? The point Moshe is making in this next statement has been largely ignored. God was not bragging. He was not trying to impress the Israelites or scare the Egyptians. It isn't in his nature. He was instead conveying a message that was intended to be considered by us today. Now, unfortunately, religious types have long been eager to show their God as fearsome and impressive, able to perform great signs and wonders, all to impress the faithful. It sounds like Allah in the Quran, although without any evidence or substance to demonstrate the viability of their gods, magic and myth were used to cower the uninitiated, I should say, and the disempowered. And so theologians have trivialized something that was quite profound prophetically. Both oath and mopeth are signs in the sense of pointing us in the right direction. They reveal what's going to occur along the way. So rather than Yahowah saying, I was great, the entire experience in Egypt and during the Exodus was designed to foreshadow the fulfillment of Passover, unyeasted bread, and firstborn children in year 4000 33 CE. It was also being used to predict a second Exodus just prior to 2033. Or more likely now in 2033 with Yah providing the locomotion. Because Yah is calling his people out of Babylon and he's going to deliver them. Be careful which chariot you board. This means that we should study the events which transpired around Moshe with an eye to the future, seeking to understand what God is doing in the lives of his people today. This reads, this tremendously great, this stupendous and extensive, vitally important and essential for growth, intensely empowering and enabling, magnifying from Gadol, to grow and become important and become powerful and magnificent, to do great things during an experience of examination and validation and of getting the desired response, for which the benefit of the relationship you saw, witnessing with your eyes the appearance of the conspicuous and distinguishing signs announcing future events, and the remarkably exceptional indications of the amazing things to come. The Badim words should never have been Deuteronomy 29:3. I wanted to mention something that's pertinent here. Would you agree that it's wise to learn from Yahweh and, when possible, to follow his example? Would you say that if we do as Yahweh has done, that we would be well served? Can you be wrong if you follow Yahweh's example? Pretty easy answers to those questions, right? So when Yahweh spoke to the children of Israel, he came out Mount Choreb to address them, gave them 3 days notice that he was going to do so. And he spoke to them. Do you think he was timid? Do you think he was meek? Do you think he was humble? Or do you think he spoke in his normal voice and that it was resounding, bold, powerful? Do you think that when the children of Israel said, we cannot handle your voice, too strong, too much for us, can't bear to look at your brilliance, go away, we don't want to hear from you or see you again? Could it have been that because Yahweh was setting the example of how important it is to be meek? Or was God saying the proper way to convey his message is to be resolute and bold? Again, is it possible to be wrong if you follow God's example? This statement in Devarim 29:3 affirms that. Now, sometimes I wonder why so few have shared the insights we have come to appreciate, such that a second Exodus with the first from Egypt foreshadowing the next from today's Babylons is appreciated. Even more perplexing, how is it that so few have come to understand the meaning behind each of the 7 Mikre? Pesach, Matzah, B'Kodim, Shavua, Teruah, Kippurim, and Sukkah. Or the terms and conditions of the covenant, even the timeline from Eden and back into the garden, and when these events have and will transpire. These insights are vital because Yahweh is consistent. What transpired in the past serves as instruction and example for the future. It is Yah's way of saying that every story serves a purpose, and every occurrence is a learning experience. The reason we are told about life in Gan Eden, the garden of great joy, is because the covenant's children and the remnant of Yisrael are returning to an expansive replication of this place. The reason for the flood account is to show how serious Yahweh is about our need to distance ourselves from the ways of man. The reason we were told about the problems associated with the people's misguided affinity for King Shaul is so that we would recognize the consequence of associating with the wannabe apostle Shaul, Paul. The story of Abraham and Yishak on Mount Moriah was a dress rehearsal for Yahowah and Dowd's fulfillment of Passover. The first Exodus provides guidance for the next. So we turn to this prophetic portrait to solidify our understanding of our role in all of this, and particularly that of the Nakri and his arrival preceding the time of Jacob's troubles. And while that reference is in Devarim 29:20, we may have found his purpose right here at the beginning of Moshe's speech. These are the words of the covenant and of its renewal. This seems to reflect upon why we are here and what we're doing, and the reason that all of this is occurring right now in this way. It is all about explaining the nature and intent of the Bereth. And if not us, then who? If not now, when? All of these wonderful stories, all of this information, the teaching, the guidance, the lessons, would all have been lost on a world without the inclination to understand, without the desire to understand, without the eyes to see, the ears to hear. If ha-masah, this adventure of discovery, of observation and examination, of validation and of responding, were not recognized as ha-oath, the appearance of the conspicuous and distinguishing signs, and the prophetic proof statements as promises which will be recognized as predictive foreshadows, as the means of communicating this message regarding future provisions, here and now, then when and where would they ever have become known? Every Devar word is a story. It's a jewel worth examining. Each letter of every word illuminates the path to God. They are Gadol, very important, empowering and enabling, conducive to our growth as children of the Bereth covenant. Now, over the course of these past 18 years, we have explored thousands of insights not previously considered, each like finding a new facet on a shimmering diamond. We have enjoyed examining them in the ideal light with just the right lens to enjoy the full spectrum of charismatic colors: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet, the colors of the rainbow and of the covenant. We have been as revealing as is possible. And so we read this tremendously important and empowering opportunity for examination and of getting the desired response. This time of testing and period of evaluation for the benefit of the relationship. You saw, you witnessed with your eyes the appearance of the conspicuous and distinguishing signs announcing these future events. The prophetic proof statements regarding the consent statement, these promises which are predictive, accurately confirming that which will occur, along with the miraculous means of communicating the message with distinctive banners and characteristic signals regarding the future provisions laden with tremendous portent, along with great expectations of things which will occur. The brilliant examples which correspond to future events, communicating that which is vitally important, enabling us to respond appropriately and to grow. Devarim words should not have been called Deuteronomy 29:3. Should we have wondered why few, if any, would come to appreciate Yahweh's approach to revelation and to understanding, we should now be cognizant. But Yahowah has not bestowed giving you the judgment or the inclination to yada, to know or to understand, to notice, to perceive, to be aware of, to acknowledge, to observe, to realize, to have the mental acuity to comprehend and to appreciate what yada has come to know, or the eyes or perspective to see, or the ears to hear, up to this point in time and even beyond on this day. Debarim words, Deuteronomy 29:4. He did not say that he stupefied his people, because he didn't. They were suitably obnoxious on their own. Jews are the brightest ethnicity on the planet, although they don't seem to understand much pursuant to God. Yahowah didn't say that he made them deaf or blind. He just didn't give them the inclination to use the gift of eyes, ears, and mind to unwrap these marvelous presents being offered to the observant, to those closely examining and carefully considering his Torah. Now, it's true that the average IQ of the Ashkenazi Jew is between 110 and 150, giving him the highest average intelligent quotient of any ethnicity. But when it comes to God, they're dunderheads. Moshe has affirmed something we learned from Dowd. The path to God is through understanding, and comprehension is predicated on being aware and then of making the proper connections. Further, knowing isn't possible without observing and listening, and ultimately understanding requires a logical mindset and an open mind, a receptive attitude, which Jews have not possessed in 3,000 years. With Yah, it has always been and will always be about Shama, listening, and Shamar, observing, about Yada, knowing, and about Bien, understanding, so that we can be Sadak, right, about the Bereth covenant. Now, in this regard, Yahowah wasn't trying to be mean to the Israelites gathered around Moshe on this day. He was just stating a fact. They had no reason and thus no inclination to know the things that they had witnessed would affect our future, a future, nearly 3,450 years distant from their own. But we do. Addressing that future, the length of Yahowah's timeline is 7,000 years, and the fulcrum of his calendar is 40 Yobel. So what God was actually saying is that the children of Israel were so obnoxious. Read the stories presented in Bamidbar, Numbers. God's people were belligerent. They were rebellious. They were embittered. They were obstinate. They were so bad, Moshe quit, asked God to kill him. That's how bad it was. The episode of the waters of Meribah is disgusting. The episode of the spies is revolting. Every time we turn around, we find the children of Israel being religious, serving as an abomination. And so the reason that God said, I'm just not going to give you the inclination to understand, is that he knew they were going to create a Talmud, they were going to create a Zohar, they were going to speak of a Hashem, they were going to create a religion that was foolish for fools. And by not giving them the inclination and the ability to understand, they would twist their own words. They would tie themselves in knots without destroying his testimony. And when you read and you listen to what Jews say about Judaism, they don't have much to say about God. say nothing about Yahowah. They know nothing about his Moed Mikre, so they don't corrupt them. They don't corrupt the covenant because they know nothing about it. They don't corrupt Yahowah's name because they won't even discuss it. They don't disparage Dowd in the sense that they almost never speak of him. They won't acknowledge anything that he's done or what was said about him. And so they're more involved just falling over their own words and ideas than they are corrupting Yahowah's testimony. This would have been a much more difficult job if I had to begin this project by saying that everything that the rabbis had said about Yahowah, about the Moed, about the Bereth, about Dowd, about Moshe, about the Torah was all wrong, and to show it was wrong, and then to dispel their myths, and then after all of that to convey the truth. But I didn't have to do that. I could just begin with sharing Yahowah's testimony as he revealed it, because he did not give them the inclination to know any of this. In 24 years of study, I surpassed the rabbis in understanding by trillions upon trillions of times. If you were to take every rabbi of all time and you compare them to the insights provided by one goy, the one goy has outsurpassed the rabbis by an infinite degree, all of them combined. And that is because of what God just said here. I have walked with you for 40 years in the wilderness, in the place where one asks the who, what, where, why, and when, even how questions regarding the word, from ma to question debar word. Since the Yatza Exodus began during Chag Matzah and 447 BCE, year 2521 Yah. It was now 1407 BCE, year 2561 Yah. 560 years after the covenant was confirmed on Mount Moriah in year 2000 Yah, 1968 BCE. The history of mankind with a neshama, conscience, plays out over the course of 7,000 years, 6,000 from expulsion from the garden to being invited to re-enter Eden. This period is divided into 3 segments of 2,000 years, a multiple of 40 Yobel. The 7 times 7 years plus 1 50-year interval, representing the time all slaves are free, all debts are forgiven, and everyone returns to the land. In year 0 Yah, 3968 BCE, Adam and Chawa were expelled from Eden, starting this progression of time. In year 1000 Yah, 2968 BCE, Noach was born, beginning the journey he and his family would experience aboard the ark as a demonstration of the covenant. In year 2000 Yah, 1968 BCE, 400 years after the flood, Abraham and Yishak confirmed the covenant with Yahowah, providing a dress rehearsal for Pesach upon Moriah. In year 3000 Yah, 968 BCE, the way of Dowd's song in the 89th Mizmor became the cornerstone of Yahowah's covenant home in this same place. 7 years after that is when Dowd gave the speech on Teruah to introduce the Nakri. Then in year 4000 Yah, in 33 CE, Dowd, having returned as he said he would, fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Bakodim, all to enable the benefits of the covenant. Therefore, with the first 3 Moedim fulfilled in year 4000 Yah and 33 CE, 40 Yobel later in 2033, year 6000 Yah, In the aftermath of the Exodus from modern manifestations of Babylon, and after having the Shabbat harvest fulfilled 7 years prior, we will experience the Teruah harvest. And then father and son, after the sacrifice of the Adamah Parah, will return on Yom Kippurim, the day of reconciliations, October 2nd, 2033 at sunset. And Dowd will anoint the mercy seat of the Ark of the Covenant with the blood of the Adamah Parah, who was shed to purge the people of their religious guilt. 5 days later on Sukkah, we will all return, this remnant of Israel and the covenant family, to the garden, to camp out with our Father for 1,000 years. It is simply an investment of time for the observant who listen to and think about what Yahweh has said and done. Also interesting regarding Midbar, wilderness, the conjunction of Ma and Dabar encourages us to seek answers to the who, what, where, why, when, and how questions regarding the Word of God, to ponder the implications of His testimony, to do what has not been done in Judaism because they are much more interested in their own mitzvot. So while this next line may seem a bit mundane, we'd be wise to consider it from the perspective of Yahweh's overall provision. I think Yah wants us to envision the enduring nature of the set-apart Spirit's garment of light, as well as the protection He provided to keep Satan from oppressing His people by nipping at their heels, as foretold in the garden, enabling us to walk with Him. Your garments did not wear out or become obsolete from upon you, and your sandals did not decompose from upon your feet. Simple enough. But God said, trust me, and I will provide. I can adorn you in a garment of light. I can place upon your feet sandals that will cause you to fly, so that you can walk directly into my presence. And you will not be bound down, because these are on your feet, not on your knees. Devarim 29:5. Well, now, in that matzah and yeasted bread is symbolic of removing the fungus of religion, government, militarism, and conspiracy from our souls, lechem bread infused with yeast is seen as corrupting. Therefore, once they had availed themselves of the benefits of Pesach and matzah, these Bakurim children were kept pure prior to entering the promised land. You have not consumed bread or wine, no intoxicating beverage, nor have you, and you have not been drunk, so that for the purpose of being a witness, you may know that indeed I am Yahweh. You may, Yahweh. And that I am your God. Well, it does take a clear head to appreciate the things of God. Those who do so have the privilege of serving as witnesses, testifying to what we have come to know about Yahweh, to Yahweh. It is the highest and best use of our time. So observe the words associated with the covenant and act upon and engage in it, so that you may become an effective witness and provide answers, gaining insights by coming to understand, and then by being circumspect with regard to everything you do, acting upon and engaging in that which leads to the benefit of the relationship. And on those inspiring words, we will conclude this program, and we will commence with them in our next episode, brought to you from the Ocean Studio. I will share them one more time so that they are at the forefront of your thinking. observe, closely examine, and carefully consider the words, the debar, of Habareth, of the covenant, and act upon and engage in it. It's a relationship. You need to participate to benefit so that you may become an effective witness, so that you might provide answers for others, so that you might testify as a witness, gaining insights by coming to understand, and then being circumspect, being prudent and prospering, paying attention to instructions so that you can comprehend with regard to everything you do, acting upon and engaging in that which leads to the benefit of the relationship. Dabarim words, Deuteronomy 29:9. Thank you for listening.